What's up, everybody? In today's video, we're going to be discussing the book Die with Zero by Bill Perkins. And I first heard about this book on the James Altucher podcast, as I do about many of the books that I read. And it seemed like a weird concept to me because it's about dying with $0 in your bank account. But I saw it in the audiobook section of the Apple Store. And I'm like, well, why not? Because I was going to get on a flight and I needed something to listen to, so I was like, I might as well get it. And it's only 5 hours long, so it's a pretty short book, all things considered. And because I didn't really think it was a good concept, I'm like, I should probably read it just to see what it's about. And it's written by Bill Perkins, as I said before. And he sounds like a football coach or a basketball coach, but he's actually a natural gas trader that was successful from that. So I think he's a multi-millionaire. And when he was on the James Altucher podcast, he was actually on a yacht with Dan Bilzerian, which is pretty crazy because Bill Perkins isn't young and he's out there partying or doing whatever with Dan Bilzerian. And he's not single either, so it was a little bit confusing. He's a family man. He just believes in living your life to the fullest. And that's really what this book is about. And with that being said, this book isn't for everybody. It's not for people that have $0 in savings or are living above their means, because you have to have money saved to live the principles in this book. Even if you don't have anything saved, you might still want to read this book because it's about planning your life. We all think we have an infinite life, infinite energy, and we don't. And there's a lot of statistics to prove that, but there's also just observation. You can observe old people and understand that they're very weak. Not all old people are weak, but you get substantially weaker when you get older, and because of that, you spend less money. And that's one of the key principles in this book, is that you're not going to be spending money the same way throughout your whole life. But also, it attacks the concept of retirement and the way we save for retirement, because most people save for retirement as if they're going to enjoy their life in retirement, and you can't really live your life that way because a lot of us, that's going to be our physically weakest point in our life. We're going to have health issues. And the reason people save for that a lot of times is because of health concerns. You think you're not going to be able to pay health insurance, and you shouldn't be saving a whole lot of money for the last few weeks of your life. You shouldn't spend a few more years in the workforce just for the final few weeks of your life. And one of the things that Bill Perkins says in here is either the government's going to pay for those final few weeks or they're not. But either way, it's not going to substantially improve your life to the point to where you should waste years of your best physical years to save that money up. The book starts out with him giving backgrounds about his personal life, about how he started out not saving money, but then he saved crazily when he was in his 20s. And he worked at a financial firm, and one of the partners told him, you shouldn't be saving when you're young. You should save later on in life. And that's one of the things he speaks about in here, is you should spend money when you're in your 20s because that's when you're going to be the most physically active, and then you should save later on. What he means here is you should be saving in your highest earning years, which most likely are going to be your 30s, 40s, and 50s. But people have a lot of excuses about why they don't do this, and he goes over a lot of those. And one of the excuses is people think it's selfish and you should leave money to your children. But he debunks that myth, because if you really care about your children, you should set up a trust, and you should get that money to them sooner in their life, because the average age where people die and they give their money to their children is when their children are in their 60s or 50s. And your children aren't going to need that money as much in their later years as they are in their younger years. And the optimal time is probably in the 30s age range, he says. And then he also gives reasons about why you should die with zero. And he mentions another author, and her name is Bronnie Ware, and she wrote this book about regrets, deathbed regrets. And there's two regrets that he mentions that are key reasons as to why you should spend your money. And he says that people, when they're on their deathbed, regret not being authentic to themselves and not living their life to the fullest. And then the second biggest regret is that they work too much. And that's something he mentions that you're not going to regret. You're not going to regret working less. So you shouldn't be optimizing your life to work more. And he says this even for the people that enjoy doing their jobs, because some people don't like to go home at the end of the day because they like their job so much. But he says even for those people, you have to spend your money, because if you're not going to spend it, then when are you ever going to use it? You're just going to die with all this money. You should at least spend it on something you enjoy doing, even if it's giving away money. And that's something he mentions here too. If you want to give your money away to a charity, then you should do that during your life, when the charity can be using it, versus at the end of your life. And there's actually a billionaire that recently accomplished this goal of dying with zero, and his name is Chuck Feeney. And he started those duty-free stores in the airport. And he recently achieved his goal of dying with zero, and he closed his nonprofit because he was able to give away all the money. So there's people that have done this, and I think he speaks about him in this book as well. But I saw an article that came out recently that guy finally accomplished his goal of dying with zero. So there is a way to do that, and if you want to see an example of somebody that was really wealthy that did it, then you should check out the story about Chuck Feeney. He recommends doing a couple other things, right? Like, you should invest in your healthcare early in your life, because that's going to reap the most benefits throughout your life. If you want to be healthy when you're older, when you retire, then you need to invest in healthcare. That's a good expense that you can use when you're young. And then another thing you need to do is plan out your life. And this is one of the biggest takeaways from this book for me, is you have to plan your life out. And he recommends doing it in 5-year increments. And you should take out all the things you want to do in your life. You should list it out, do an exercise, and then you should put it in these 5-year buckets. And things that don't require a lot of physical activities should obviously go to the end of your life. And the things that require more physical activity, like traveling or fitness stuff, should go earlier in your life. And you have to do this. He says it's not a bucket list, because you're not trying to come up with a list of things you want to do before you die. You're coming up with a list of things you want to do, and you're allocating it across your life. And you're going to come up with how much money you need as well to see if you can do it. And then he also mentions the concept of a net worth peak to help you understand when you need to quit your job. And he comes up with a formula where you need to understand how much money you need in order to survive versus the years you have left to live. And it's basically like a retirement metric. And I think this is still hard to do based on the formula he gives in this book, because accounting for inflation, changes in expenses. But the way he talks about it is that the way you do it is you have to realize you're not going to spend as much money when you're older as you think you are. And people spend a lot less money when they get older. So that's something that people need to realize. And there's actually a concept in retirement planning called the go-go years, the slow-go years, and the no-go years. And I hadn't really heard about that. And they don't really talk to people about that until you reach retirement age. And so that's something else I learned in this book that's important. That if you're saving all your money for retirement, then you should be cautious, because you're not going to be able to enjoy a lot of that money because of how old people spend their money. And he says like the normal age that most people talk about this peak net worth concept is 62, because that's when you can start getting Social Security. But he says it's going to be different for everybody. You could probably retire early depending on what you want to do in your life. But he says it's the peak net worth number is basically a point of time, and it's not really like a financial number. It's not 2 million, 3 million. It's amount of time issue, a point in time where you're going to reach the highest net worth that you're ever going to be in your life, and then you should start going downhill from there. Because most people, the way they think of net worth is just constant growth over time, and most people want to be super wealthy, and they just want to take all this money to the grave, as if that's an accomplishment that people should be doing. And I think that's kind of silly too. And I think most people should realize that as well. And they should begin to think about that. Especially if you're younger in life, you should start thinking about these concepts. And you shouldn't be working a job you don't like, because, especially when you're young, because you're going to be wasting a lot of those great years. And that's how he basically finishes the book. If you're younger in life, take bigger risks with finances, with jobs, because you're going to be able to overcome them. If you want to be an actor, a producer, start a business, do it early in your life. Take those risks, when you can overcome it and build a career while you still have years left. But I don't think you should necessarily just give up on your dreams just because you're older, but it's just a planning point here that if you're younger, then and you really want to do something, don't take a job you don't like. Do something crazy that you think is worth it for yourself and that means a lot. Is time frame wise, it's better to do that young than when you're older and you have more money and a family that you have to pay for, because you're going to have a lot more expenses, and if you quit your job to do something risky, it's going to be harder for you to do that later in life than it is earlier in your life. So that's my review of Die with Zero by Bill Perkins. I do recommend this for people that are planning their retirement or are planning their life in general, because you can use this to plan your life. Everybody should plan their life in this way. You have to realize that we're all going to die in the stages of life. You're not going to be physically active, most likely, throughout your whole life. You're going to lose physical abilities. You're going to have health issues as you get older. And that's something to keep in mind. And in America, and a lot of economies around the world, we're taught to just save for retirement and then we enjoy our money in retirement. But you're not going to be able to do this, and you should be very careful about following that path. You should learn more about at what ages people spend what amount of money and plan your life accordingly. So I do recommend this book. It's a pretty quick read, and I really enjoyed the book. It was way different than I thought it would be, and it was actually pretty useful. And I thought I wouldn't agree with a lot of it, but I really agree with a lot of what Bill Perkins says in here. So to get my book reviews, book summaries, and book recommendations, make sure to subscribe to this channel, like this video, and comment below. Thanks for watching.